Welcome back, my friends. I'm really hoping you enjoy today's story. I'd love to get feedback from any of you. Today's story is called The Quantum Device and the Creatures Within. Now on to the story. Jerry couldn't sleep one night, so he decided to start working a project of his in his room around 2:30 one morning. He was comfortable in his new comforter he had just purchased from the store earlier the previous day. He was scarfing down some pizza while working on his plans of a new quantum displacement machine, but then far away, he heard a deep, low rumbling. This was not like any noise he had heard before. It was not like an earthquake. That was a sound he had grown quite familiar with. This rumbling, Jerry thought, sounded like a creature of very large magnitude. He sounded very hungry. This thought bothered him for a moment, and he wasn't quite sure where it had come from, but after about 30 minutes or so, it had become quiet. Not a single sound. Jerry finished scarfing down his pizza, then went to his lab to start working on some of his new ideas for his machine. It didn't take him long to forget about the noise he'd heard earlier. While getting the machine together, he heard some weird sounds outside once more. He went outside to check again, but as he did, the noise seemed to scatter, like the way a Gatling gun sounds, but like everywhere at once. There were large thumping sounds coming from one of the lower floors of his office building. This unnerving sound came on so quickly, but then just as quickly as the Gatling gun sound started, it appeared to stop. Jerry went to his office. Then the sound started again, except it was much louder, and the scatter sound had sped up immensely. It was so intense that it started sounding like some unholy shower of boulders pouring and bashing the building and nearby cars. Jerry's fear was growing. He wasn't sure what was going on. He got to thinking about it and figured maybe it's just his friend Mason, as he's always messing with odd phenomena and has ways to pull things right out of thin air. He plays pranks on Jerry quite often. Jerry thought to himself,
"Yeah, it's gotta be Mason messing with me."
Jerry went back to his office to grab his phone and began attempting to call his friend Mason. It kept going to voicemail. This seemed suspicious, as he knows that Jerry had no plans and also had never set up his voicemail, due to he just didn't believe in using it. In fact, he'd get angry anytime anyone tried getting him to set it up. The sound still getting more hectic outside, Jerry powered up his laptop and also hoping to be able to check the local news on the TV, hoping that others had heard these sounds and possibly reported it. Both acting up at first. His laptop would power off and on, his TV powered off and on as well, but then all of a sudden, both powered back up and the screens of both displayed clearly. "We see you. We are watching you. You shouldn't have started meddling in things that humanity isn't ready for." This startled Jerry. Jerry turned off the TV but continued trying to get his computer to work. Even though this is still way beyond normal, being the skeptic he is, he still suspected Mason. He just knew that he had to be the culprit that's causing all of these issues. Jerry discovered something odd. The sounds had left the building for now, but it was loud outside. The odd thing was, when he walked back into the building, he tripped over a metal trash can. The can fell over onto the hardwood floor. There should have been a loud thud from the can, but that's just it. There was no sound from it at all. Then, to make things worse, the power just went off, leaving Jerry utterly in the dark. Jerry stood there for a bit in deep thought of what the heck was going on, then decided to make his way back to the project room, where all of his inventions were. He sat there at his desk for a bit. He felt a presence behind him. He panicked and stood up to quickly causing him to somehow stumble. In turn, he fell backwards and knocked his head on the door, causing him to be disoriented. He then collapsed and passed out. When he awoke, he was kneeling at his desk, but he didn't even know how he got into this position. Jerry's adrenaline was pumping. There were definitely some out-of-place happenings. He sat there for a bit, frozen in place whilst listening for sound of any kind, but to his amazement, there was none. He couldn't even hear his own voice or the keys of the keyboard if he tried to use the computer. Jerry opened a window. Then all of a sudden he heard a very loud roar outside, and a voice that sounded like Mason begging for help.
Help me,
Mason shouted. After recovering from his strange experience, Jerry quickly made his way back downstairs, curious about what was happening to his friend Mason. He could see nothing out of the ordinary in the streets below. The city seemed to be in complete chaos. Cars were overturned, buildings were collapsed, debris and litter was everywhere. However, he heard a faint voice calling for help from one of the lower floors of his building. Jerry rushed to the stairs and began descending cautiously, flashlight in hand. As he reached the floor Mason had called from, the sound seemed to have ceased. He looked around for any sign of damage, but it was just as if nothing had happened. Jerry felt a sudden wave of despair, thinking that his friend was dead, or somehow possibly even worse. Just then, he heard a voice coming from what appeared to be nowhere.
Mason. Mason. Mason.
Jerry's eyes widened. It was the same deep rumbling sound he'd heard before, but now it seemed to have words. It continued.
I see you. I hear you. You shouldn't have started something you weren't ready for. We will teach you.
Jerry felt a strong urge to run or hide, but curiosity won him over again.
Who are you?
The voice answered in the same deep tone.
We have always been here.
As if to emphasize its point, a nearby wall rumbled and shook violently. What do you want?
You will know soon.
It responded. Jerry felt odd. He just got this creepy feeling as he realized that something possibly bad was happening. Perhaps another dimension, or the being had been somehow touched by his project. He needed to finish the machine, but what would these beings demand in return? As if reading his mind, it said,
You will help us.
Jerry thought about running again, but fear stopped himself. What could they do to him? It was possible this was a prank or some kind of trick.
What will you do for me then?
He asked. Silence followed him for a moment before the voice answered.
We will let you live.
He wasn't sure he wanted that answer, but it gave him more time to think about his machine.
We warn you now. Do not cross us.
He had to finish it. Jerry continued downward, now cautious, and found Mason's office door wide open. Inside, there was no sign of anyone or anything out of place. However, he heard the voice again.
You shouldn't have started. We will not let you live.
A growling sound came next as a shadow moved in the corner, and Jerry saw a black shape appear from the darkness, something immense, almost humanoid. He turned and ran back up the stairs as fast as he could, trying to leave that floor. As he got to the first landing, the beast caught him with its massive claw and threw him against the wall. Pain surged through Jerry, but it didn't hurt, just a sense of shock. He couldn't breathe, then felt lifted by some unseen force and then just deposited on his desk again. He tried to move, but was locked in place from the shock and the fear of it all. As he gasped for air, he saw the thing approach him, slowly, its eyes glowing red, its face constantly shifting, as if in more than one quantum realm at a time. Jerry had a moment to think about everything as it bent down toward him. It spoke again.
We see you. We will teach you.
Then, with a swift motion, it left, and Jerry felt the darkness overtake him. Later, he awoke in his bed, confused and very sore.
What the heck just happened?
Jerry said to himself. He got up and looked around, disoriented, but soon remembered his situation. It was morning, and he had to go to work on his machine, regardless of what happened last night. But now, what? His fear was growing as fast as his curiosity. Was this something more to his project than just a quantum displacement device? Was something else possibly involved? He had no idea how much time he had. Maybe a week or less before they'd return to finish their lesson.
But then what? What will they do if I finish the project? What will they do if I don't?
Jerry mumbled to himself. He had to work. Jerry kept thinking about what would happen if he didn't, and shuddered at the voice of the thing from last night. It wasn't human, it couldn't be, but yet it knew him and Mason, and seemed to have control over the city. What could it do? He decided to push on with his work, but finish soon as he could. When finished, he would take it to Mason and hope for some answers. Jerry started working on a plan to complete his machine. It was time-consuming, but also dangerous. If he did nothing, the thing would likely destroy him, or at least leave him useless.
I have to work fast,
Jerry said to himself. He began with another idea that was faster but risky. The next day came with no noise from outside. Jerry thought about trying the news again, but stopped himself. He just worked on his machine and tried not to think of the thing, which he decided to call it a beast, or what he assumed was. His thoughts were interrupted by his computer screen displaying, "We see you." Jerry got the chills as he heard no sound from any speakers. It wasn't Mason's voice either. How are they doing this? The same deep rumbling had come back, but this time in text. He looked around and saw nothing out of place. Then his phone rang, and he answered it. The voice was on the other end.
"We have seen you. We will teach you."
Jerry felt the very hair on his neck stand on end as Mason's voice came from it. High-pitched and scared.
Jerry,
it said again, then silence. He thought about hanging up but waited. It was just a minute before the beastly growl returned over the line.
"We will come for you."
Jerry hung up, his heart beating faster than ever. He had to finish his machine. He worked like crazy, and as he neared completion, Mason knocked on his door. Jerry jumped and opened it to see his friend standing there, shaking and bruised and equally excited. "Jerry!" "Mason." He breathed in relief.
"You okay?" "They caught me."
"Where'd you go? What happened?" he asked. Mason told him of the floor below, and Jerry was silent for a second before replying. "Did you see it?"
"Yes,"
he whispered.
"And now you're here. They let me go."
Then he looked up.
"I ran."
Jerry noticed his friend's eyes looking around frantically, as if continually in fear. Jerry said,
"It's gone."
Mason nodded. They both stood and thought for a moment. Jerry asked,
"What is it?" "I don't know. We have to finish your machine,"
Mason replied, and they went to work on it together. Jerry and Mason worked quickly but carefully on the quantum displacement machine, sharing their thoughts along the way. They both knew that time was short and the mysterious entity had taken an interest in Jerry's creation. The more they talked, the less they understood what was happening and why. Finally, after 2 days of non-stop work, they completed their project. It was a sleek black cube with glowing lines across it and buttons to power it. Jerry powered it up, then looked at Mason as if to say, "Let's see." They heard nothing. Suddenly, the office door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Jerry pushed against it. The walls shook from the force. The voice came.
"We will teach you. You have made something we desire."
Jerry almost spoke, but stopped himself. "Why?"
"What do you want?"
Jerry said with fear in his voice. The deep rumbling answered back.
"We need you. We have seen your machine and can use it."
"For what?" Jerry said, feeling a bit more brave with Mason's presence. The room was silent for a moment, as there was no response. A few moments later, the voice came again in their minds.
"Your lives for our knowledge."
Jerry remembered the beast last night, then asked, "Why should we help you?" Silence followed him as he thought about it.
"You'll kill us if we don't."
"We will."
Mason said nothing, but looked at Jerry. Jerry answered, "What do you have planned?" The voice said, "This Jerry saw the wall dissolve behind a shadow and Mason, who was gone. Jerry gasped for air as he watched it lift him up and deposit him in the air. He hung there, unable to move or breathe. A black shape appeared again and spoke.
You will help us.
It held him up as if he weighed nothing. What do you want? What do you want? Jerry asked. The thing looked at him with its red eyes, then said,
You have a week.
It released him, and he fell to the floor, gasping for breath. He got up quickly and ran. Mason gone, but the door locked. Jerry tried it and found himself in a dead end. He sat down and pondered how fast this was getting out of hand. The rumbling said,
We will teach you. You must help.
Jerry thought about his work and his life. His last chance to finish it had been when he met Mason. He felt sure that the voice wanted his machine, but what for? Where are we? He asked, as the room was silent again.
You have no idea.
It answered.
I need you. We will come back.
Jerry thought of his machine. They wouldn't destroy it. He'd hide it. Then they could come for him and maybe kill him, or worse. Maybe he should start again with the machine. No, he had to find out more first. He felt trapped, unable to think of anything but how to stop this thing. It watched him, waiting. Jerry got up and walked around his office, then went outside into the night. It was empty, except for some fallen cars. The next day, Jerry thought about what he could do, and the whole city was wrecked, like a bomb had hit it. He wondered if this thing had come from somewhere else, or even from another time. It knew his machine and him. Was it one of those beings? If so, how did it get here? He needed to study the machine again, but couldn't be alone, and he needed Mason. Jerry tried his phone but got no answer. His friend was probably hiding too. The voice said in his head,
We will come for you. We will come for you.
A shadow appeared on him, and then a claw touched his arm, lifting him off the floor. What do you want? Jerry asked as he looked down at it. It lowered to eye level with him, red eyes blazing. The rumbling came again.
You will help us.
Then Jerry felt his body being transported, and nothing else but darkness. When he awoke, he was alone in the office again. He sat up and saw Mason working at his desk, smiling. He was surprised to see him, then angry. How did you get back? You let me out, Jerry replied. I ran, Mason said. They looked at each other and saw what they were facing.
We have a week, don't we? You can finish it in that time. Neither can we hide forever.
Then, an idea came to Jerry. He had to make something small yet useful. He got the machine out of sight. He said,
I will need time, but you can't stop me. I have to find out what this thing wants and how it works.
Mason was scared, but Jerry had hope. He asked if they had seen the beast again. Mason nodded. They looked at each other for a moment, then got to work. Mason agreed. You are right.
We can't hide forever.
Jerry thought about what he could do and stood up. He had an idea.
Let's go.
He put the machine away and walked out with Mason following. They went to the wreckage, but the streets were deserted and cars scattered.
We need a lab,
Jerry said. They found a store that wasn't ruined and set up their machines there, not knowing if anyone would come. Jerry explained his plan while Mason helped him put it together. When done, they could see its power. It was a small box with several wires and a few levers to control it. They powered it on and watched as the lights glowed. Jerry looked at Mason.
We have to find out if this thing can be used or not.
He showed him how to run it. Mason said,
I'll help you.
The machine hummed and made a low noise. Jerry nodded as Mason looked around. Suddenly they heard the rumbling sound and saw its shape again. Near them. It was big, black, and had red eyes. They were trapped, but Jerry went to the controls. He hit a lever and felt something happen as he heard it roar and run. Now! Jerry shouted, and they ran as it came closer. The box made an arc of light in front of them, and they ducked down just as it was gone.
Did we do it?
Mason asked, standing.
Maybe,
Jerry said, panting. He looked at the machine and felt energy. It can't last forever. They both knew they had to hurry now. They went back to their office and worked non-stop. 2 nights later, Jerry was exhausted, but his machine was finished. He made it small and portable with controls and a battery for power. He looked at Mason. We have to find the thing and see if it works. It was either that or die trying to destroy it. They found the beast and tried it. Nothing happened. They waited, then Jerry asked it. It knows we are here, he said, but still, no sound or response. He felt the box humming, and suddenly it exploded in light. Then a thud hit, and the thing was gone. He looked at Mason.
Did we do it?
Jerry nodded. They ran back to their office and tried the news. Everything had been repaired, but no mention of what happened. Mason asked.
Is it gone?
Jerry answered.
I hope so.
Let's wait until tomorrow. They sat in silence for a bit, then Jerry said,
What do you think it is?
Mason shook his head.
I'm scared,
Jerry said. I don't know. We did well though. Jerry, we can start our business, he said. We can, Jerry agreed, but he had to finish the machine. He made a few more and gave them to Mason, who worked on the rest. 2 weeks later they were in business, but only Jerry worried if it was over. They tried using their machines on their projects with no problems. Jerry had to keep working on it. The other machines were selling well, but he knew something wasn't right, and that thing could return. He watched the news for any strange happenings. Mason laughed it off as time passed. They became rich and famous, but Jerry still didn't know if it was over. He was happy about his project, but always worried. One night, he felt an urge to work on it more, so he did. He felt a sound again, then turned to see the beast outside watching him.
We see you.
They yelled.
We would have spared you. For now, you may have won. We will return one day. We never forgive. We never forget. Expect us.
It growled and moved in his direction. Jerry sat down, feeling helpless and scared. It had come back. Jerry was petrified as he saw the beast again. But this time, it seemed to be talking to him directly.
We warn you now. Do not cross us.
He knew he had to finish his project, but what could it do now? The beast wanted something from his machine, or maybe Jerry himself. He couldn't leave it alone though. That could mean death. He put everything away and went out for air, then back in after a minute. He was scared to be anywhere near the thing. So he worked with new energy on his project. He knew time was short, but still didn't know what to do. He decided to hide his machine until it left, but he needed Mason's help. He knocked on his door, then entered when he heard him moving about.
What is it?
Jerry asked.
The thing is back,
Jerry replied, looking at him.
We have to finish your project.
Mason was scared.
You got us out once. What if it comes again?
Jerry showed him the machine.
It can't,
he said. He worked until dawn and went home. He worked alone for 2 more days, then bought a few machines for Mason to test. They worked fine and he told him his plan. We need a hiding spot, Jerry said, as they took one outside. It was gone in seconds. Jerry knew the beast had returned. He ran to his office with Mason following as it roared at them. The box hummed, then light flew out and stopped it. Jerry yelled, "Go!" But it seemed immune to their machine. They heard a sound and saw something big moving away. They heard it go in the distance and watched it leave. Jerry looked at Mason. "We did it," he said. Mason was stunned. "What will it do?" Jerry shook his head and smiled. "We won't know until we try." They went back to the office, but soon their machines were useless without power, as Jerry had drained them. The beast was gone. They hoped for good. They continued working on a new project with Jerry always an eye out at night. Well, that's it for today's story. I really hope you enjoyed it. If so, Please give us a like and subscribe, and or give us a comment if you'd like. If any of you have any ideas for a story, I'd gladly listen, and maybe we can oblige. See you soon.